All right, I'm not getting any sleep. I think I have accepted it. I think I'm at that stage in my life where I just accept that I'm not getting any sleep because Nvidia keeps releasing videos and I keep watching. So they have another video talking about Nvidia Reflex. If those of you aren't aware, Nvidia Reflex is kind of about input latency. Essentially, whenever you're trying to hit your target, latency usually affects that depending on how quickly your mouse can actually track the target versus the target actually being hit. So they made some changes to Nvidia Reflex, and in other words, Nvidia Reflex 2, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at it because I have nothing else better to do. So let's go ahead and see what's going on.
Nvidia spent over 5 years studying input lag and responsiveness, which is how quickly a game displays the reaction to a player's inputs. A few milliseconds can be the difference between victory and defeat. Higher latency can hurt performance through missed hit registration, inconsistent aiming, and disadvantages when holding an angle. In 2020, we launched Nvidia Reflex, which tightly synchronizes the CPU and the GPU to reduce latency by an average of 50% in top competitive titles. Today, we're announcing a breakthrough in our latency research with the introduction of Reflex 2 with frame warp. Over 5 years ago, our esports research team published a study illustrating how players aim better and complete tasks faster when rendered frames are updated based on more recent input. For example, when a player aims to the right, it takes some time for that action and the new camera perspective to be displayed. What if instead, an existing frame's camera could be shifted or warped to the right to show the results much sooner? Frame warp reduces your camera latency through this concept, which has gone from research to reality. Let's dive into exactly how frame warp works. As a frame is being rendered by the GPU, the CPU is calculating the camera position of the next frame in the pipeline, based on the latest mouse input. Frame warp samples the new camera position from the CPU and warps the frame being rendered by the GPU to use this new camera position. The warp is conducted as late as possible, just before the rendered frame is sent to the display, ensuring the most recent mouse input is reflected on screen. In the end, players see the rendered frame, but with an updated camera perspective, reducing latency and improving your ability to aim, track, and hit more shots. Depending on the frame rate, this process can be happening hundreds of times per second, constantly delivering the freshest camera perspective. Gamers are going to feel truly connected to their mouse movements, whether it's tracking a moving target or quickly flicking to aim at an unexpected foe. To warp to the most recent camera position, frame warp shifts many of the game's pixels, which can create small holes in some regions of the image, especially when mouse movements are intense. However, Nvidia has developed a latency-optimized predictive rendering algorithm which uses camera, color, and depth data from prior frames to in-paint these holes accurately. For example, here's the finals with frame warp and no in-painting. And here's what it looks like with in-painting. The result is a frame which shows the freshest camera position seamlessly inserted into the rendering pipeline. Using this cutting-edge warp process, frame warp reduces latency by around an entire frame time, which amounts to nearly another 50% of latency savings on top of Reflex low latency mode, for a total reduction of 75% from native. Players will experience improved target acquisition, faster reaction times, and tighter aim precision. Let's see it in-game. In the finals, without Reflex, players can see a moderate amount of PC latency. Turning on Reflex low latency mode reduces latency significantly. Activating Reflex frame warp reduces input lag by another 50%, for a total reduction of 75% from native, making it easier to track targets in motion, land flick shots, secure eliminations, and the win. And unlike Reflex low latency mode, Reflex frame warp provides significant latency savings even in CPU bottleneck scenarios. Here, we have Reflex 2 enabled in Valorant, a CPU-limited game that runs blazingly fast. Frame rates are not only insanely fast, but PC latency now reaches below 2 milliseconds. This is the lowest latency figure we've ever seen in an FPS. We're bringing Reflex 2 to top competitive games like Valorant and the finals, with more to be announced in the future. Reflex frame warp is coming soon for all GeForce RTX gamers, and will be available first on RTX 50 series GPUs.
Okay, let's go back real quick here. Let me see make sure I heard that correctly.
RTX gamers, and will be available is coming soon for all GeForce RTX gamers.
Okay, just making sure. So basically, this technology is going to actually be on the 40 series as well as the 50 series, and of course other series as well. Basically, any RTX card. So 3090, 4090, 5090, so on and so forth. So this is actually one of the best things I've seen, because this right here just decreases your latency, because we already technically had the frame rate, right? Because you kind of get that from the 4090 if we're talking about the high end, because he's talking about the high end. If you're talking about competitive shooters and getting the lowest latency possible, you're talking about, you know, the mid to high end or the high end. So we kind of already had the whole frame situation down packed with the 4080, 4090, so on and so forth, 4070 Ti especially, right? And or super series. So with this here, this is basically warping that frame so that the frame that you are actually getting is the frame that has your actual sight lines on the actual target, changing the actual AI image that you're supposed to get to something different. Is super good. That is like awesome. Basically, reducing the amount of latency that you have between shots and latency that you have in games is so strong that this may be overpowered, bro. Like I may buy it just because of this feature alone. Has nothing to do with DLSS 4.0. It has everything to do with the fact that I get low latency in games. If you're a shooter fan, then you're excited for this. However, at the same time, you might be getting your butt kicked from people who have like 50 series for a little bit until you actually get it on the 40 series, because they're not going to release it on the 40 series immediately. They don't want to cannibalize their own product, a la, you know, 30 series being around for forever, or the 10 series being around for forever, that kind of situation. You know what I mean? So I like the idea of what they're going with here and how good it is when it comes to generation from lag input, and increasing that to the point where it is almost half as much lag as you would get whenever you're playing any type of shooter. If you're doing competitive shooter, man, this is probably one of the best things that's happened to date, coming from the whole Blackwell architecture and the Nvidia keynote speech in general. So hats off to anybody that happens to be a shooter, because you are doing very well right now. And that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you like this video, go to like button. If you really like it, go to subscribe. I love you either way. Take care. All the best, and bye. I will see you next time. I'm going to bed. Peace.